This episode of the EdTech podcast is sponsored by Learnosity. Learnosity is the global leader in assessment solutions. Serving over 700 customers and more than 40 million learners, its mission is to advance education and learning worldwide with best-in-class technology. Learnosity's specialised expertise and pre-built assessment APIs make it easy for modern learning platforms to quickly launch fully featured products, scale on demand, and always meet fast-evolving market needs. Visit learnosity.com today to discover how. This episode is sponsored by Worktrip. Worktrip is a curated and quality-vetted community marketplace for offsites, featuring specialist coaches, facilitators, inspiring speakers, relevant venues and experiences. Do you want to make team offsites more impactful and less of an admin headache? At Worktrip, our mission is to raise the value of your team offsites so that you can retain and develop your top talent and high-performance culture. We help companies to set goals for their offsites, discover and book suppliers, share information with their teams, and measure impact. Chat to us now at www.worktrip.com. Hello everyone and welcome to the EdTech podcast, where our mission is to improve the dialogue between ed and tech for better innovation and impact. A big shout out to Learnosity for sponsoring this week's episode. Before we get into our feature interview, don't forget some events coming up. EduTech Europe is in Amsterdam on the 5th and 6th of October, and EdTech Next Summit is on the 24th to 26th of October in Germany. And great to see Bright Eye's latest work on learning for the over 50s, which is such an important theme as we look at productivity and the future of work in the Western world especially. We've also got future episodes coming up with a neurodiversity advisor of Lego and the founder of Sharesi on why you should have diversity in your leadership team to strengthen your position against risk, and how to manage rising costs in school by renting your shareable spaces within the community. But now it's the moment you've all been waiting for, and it's a great pleasure to me as Laura Warnier is an amazing engine of purposeful activity in the EdTech space and in the company you will have no doubt heard so much about, GoStudent. For me, this is a big inspiration, so headphones on and listen in. Here we go. Okay, so I am really excited. I'm joined today by Laura Warnier.
Thanks a lot, Sophie. Thank you for the invitation.
No, I'm really excited because we met very briefly at EdTechX this year, and I know that you jumped on stage because you won an award on behalf of GoStudent. I was really excited to get the chance to meet, and finally we've got some time in the diary to sit down and do a recording. Just for our listeners, a little bit of background on Laura and then on GoStudent. Laura is the Chief Growth Officer at the online tutoring platform GoStudent, which, as many of our listeners will know, was recently valued at 3 billion euros. Laura joined GoStudent in 2018 as the company's second full-time employee, which gives you a wonderful vantage point on how the company has grown, and you joined to develop the commercial strategy. She built from scratch a scalable customer acquisition machine and grew the marketing and sales teams from 0 to 250 employees. And in 2020, Laura started GoStudent's international expansion. She launched the French market and created a playbook that enabled the scale up to further expand to 15 countries within a year, which is quite astonishing. And Laura is now leading branding, marketing, partnerships and international expansion. And we can talk as well a little bit about the Belgian initiative Syndicate One, which is, I guess, your way of bringing together the ecosystem and in terms of early stage tech, in terms of investing, sharing knowledge and connecting. And just very quickly, a little bit about GoStudent, and then we'll get into some conversation. So unless anyone's been living under a rock, most people listening will know about GoStudent, but GoStudent was founded in 2016. GoStudent's mission is to build the #1 global school. It's one of the world-leading online tutoring providers, and the company was founded in Vienna in 2016 by Felix Oswald. I'll probably pronounce that incorrectly as well. and Gregor Mueller, and is operational in 23 markets. And GoStudent provides paid one-to-one video-based tuition to primary, secondary, and college-age students in 30 plus subjects, and using a membership model. So that's the background. So Laura, just to kick off, how are you today, and what's happening in your world sort of today and this week?
Well, very good. I mean, we are all in the summer mood, right? So like the sun is shining, so that's always helping to get the energy back. So indeed, the past few months have been quite epic. That's what's happening, I think, when you join a hyper growth company. We are also like, as the entire, like I would say, startup ecosystem, also like switching a bit our mindset from hyper growth to also more profitability and efficiencies, which is actually an amazing, I would say, like homework for the company. So yeah, a lot of things going on, but always very positive.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sense I get from you, is that you sort of like bounce around, you have this mad energy. So yeah, I know that with people like that, everyone around them sort of benefits, and it becomes like a yeah, almost contagious, infectious energy. So that's great to see. You know, in terms of our chat today, we'll do some bits about GoStudent as an edtech business, but also about your educational offering as well. My first question I put here: GoStudent experienced extraordinary growth and success to date. Obviously, you were a hugely instrumental part of that as the second full-time employee. But I'm really keen to know, from your perspective, what were the other factors in the GoStudent success story? So, for example, was it that it was the right moment in time? Was it that the investment allowed for sort of this hyper growth? Was it the team and the leadership? In your eyes, what was the mix of how all that came together?
So as you say, it's always a mix. So there is not like, I would say, one perfect recipe. That's also like depending on the environment and the people around. But I would say for me, first of all, I mean, these are the founders and the leadership team. So when I joined GoStudent, it was just two founders who had like a few students working for them and a few freelancers developing the product. And what I could see is like how complementary they were, how ambitious, and how they actually found a problem that they wanted to solve. And that was for me actually the first signal that this company would be successful. The second part was a lot around execution. So at the beginning, you are very hands-on. I always say that I got probably 30 jobs at GoStudent. So going from being the CRM manager to a sales team lead to also like working on the tutor recruitment team, working also with customer success and so on. That also really like all of us, we were really like hands-on in the business, listening to call, being ourselves, like sometimes Felix and Gregor were themselves the tutors for the students. So that really enabled us to understand the market, understand also the job of our employees, and help them to actually do their job. I would say something that was also, of course, an accelerator was COVID. So before actually the pandemic, we were actually trying, the main role, and that's the reason why we actually built a sales team, was to convince parents that tutoring can be done online. At that time, we had more than 30% actually of the prospect that we had on the phone who even refused to have a free trial session with one of our tutors because the tutoring was online. So for them, it was actually unmanageable. So they had to explain, they had to say, no, the tutor needs to come to my kid's place, need to sit next to my kid, and so on. And of course, with the pandemic, this accelerated everything. So our sales team was not there to actually convince that it had to be online because the parents had to do it. However, what happened also there at the beginning is that the experience of online tutoring was not good. So online tutoring at the beginning was actually something that was in existence. So people didn't want to believe in it. Then it became actually something, a must-have, but then also kind of a negative connotation because the experience at the beginning was not good. So we had to convince that actually one-on-one online tutoring is a completely different experience than a one-to-many with a group, a class of 25, 30 students with teachers were often actually not trained or not used to actually do online. So that's where we had to also convince the parents of the benefits of online tutoring. And then also overall, I would say the entire investment industry. So EdTech was always kind of an industry that was not, I would say overfunded. So if we compare, for example, the number of unicorns in finance versus EdTech, I mean, we had 300 plus unicorns in finance. We had 30 in EdTech. And I would say that this this entire like also pandemic kind of shaped a bit that industry, the mindset also of investors, because they saw that something was coming. Education was one of the market, I would say, the industry that was not well digitalized, even with certain basics. And that's how I would say that these are a few different factors, but there is many more, but those are a few that I would like to highlight.
Well, one of the things I was musing on was the kind of policy change. So obviously online tutoring was sort of this big focus in Chinese investment. And obviously they had this policy change and, you know, some of that talent and investment was sort of spread elsewhere. Did that have any effect or not so much?
Not really. So of course, like when we heard about the news, I mean, what I would say one question that we had is like, okay, what's going to happen with those Chinese companies? Are they going to be like now much more involved in Europe and trying to also like conquer that market? Because back in the days, we were like, you know, looking at VipKit, for example, they also had to shut down a big part of the business because they were relying on the American tutors. And this was also like a part of the policy in China, but we actually didn't feel the impact. So for us, I would say no direct impact.
Yeah. And then just at the beginning, you were talking about, you know, the signals that showed you that this was going to be a high growth company. What was the story behind the founders and how you came to meet them? And, you know, what was their background? And then how did you meet and come together?
Yeah. So actually they have quite an interesting story. So Felix and Gregor actually know each other from partying during high school time, I would say. So they are really good friends. Felix was actually always very attracted by mathematics. So he actually, at the age of 14, he went to university as a kind of a hobby to follow some mathematics classes. He was very well actually like inspired by his grandfather, who also taught him how to play chess. He was also kind of inspiring to always learn more. And since he was a bit bored at school, that was kind of they give him that opportunity. So at the age of 18, he actually graduated from his bachelor in mathematics at the university.
Wow.
And after that, he went to Cambridge for his master and also in Zurich. And at that time, his little brother, who was still in high school, had a bit of difficulties in mathematics. And he was actually chatting with his brother via WhatsApp to get support. And then quickly, he also helped the entire classroom of his little brother via WhatsApp with all those mathematics questions. And that's where he realized that there was a problem, that students needed actually support, easy and fast support for their homework. And he contacted his best friend at that time, so Gregor, who also founded already a small business. So he already had this entrepreneurial spirit. And together, they actually built a homework chat. So that was the first product of GoStudent. So they contacted an agency to develop a mobile application that would enable to connect the students and the tutors. Tutors were many university students to help them with their homework. And the tutors at that time would receive a few cents per questions answer within the chat. But then what they realized is that, the product itself, I mean, was a nice product, but the purchasing power of the student was not there. Also, they would not spend probably, 10 euros per month to actually get this homework support. And the parents would maybe also not see the strong added value for it. But what they realized by doing a bit of research with the student is that they would love to also have one-on-one actually tutoring. And doing it online would enable to have a more flexibility, access to really like strong teachers, even if the student is based in the countryside, as we can have, in Austria, also in Germany at that time, because we're only in the DACH region. When you live in the countryside, all the strong students, they went to university in the cities, and therefore you might not have the support. And therefore, so they did this online tutoring. And I joined actually the company when the product so the online classroom was ready, and we had to start selling it to parents. So we were not really making revenue at that time when I joined, but Headhunter were actually looking for head of sales and marketing. And with my background at Google, so at Google, I was actually selling to companies performance marketing solution. So the all Google search and the Google YouTube and display environment. And that's why it was a good mix. I had the sales experience and the marketing experience. And that's why I joined to really make GoStudent known across the world.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And I actually really love the WhatsApp element of that thread through GoStudent story. And if I understand correctly, in some elements that's still used as a communication device between tutors and parents. Is that right?
Exactly. So back in the days, so we realized that WhatsApp is actually a very convenient tool. And tutoring is also something very emotional, right? So you actually want to have a close connection with the tutor. The kid wants to have also a close connection with the tutor and so on. And we realized that WhatsApp in Europe and back in the days in DACH was actually the most used communication system. And we didn't have at the time the money, neither the brand, the brand awareness to actually build a new communication system. Nobody would download it. It would be also far too complex. So we decided to actually start with WhatsApp right away. And that created much more like trust and intimacy with the parent, first of all. And second, it was a tool that was there, that was easy to use and that everyone knew.
Why I find that so brilliant. So I'm an avid WhatsApper, probably to my shame, but why I love it is because back in the day, so when I think about starting this podcast 6 years ago, a lot of the big edtech ideas were around this sort of triangulation of parents, students, and teachers in these communication platforms. That was like the golden idea. But obviously, every system like that has friction, and actually WhatsApp is a tool on your phone. And, you know, as long as the safeguarding elements, if there's younger people, are sorted, like, I can totally see how that's completely intuitive. So I just think it's, you know, it's a smart move because it's there and people are using it.
Exactly. And I think that the most important thing that we need to do when we build a service or a product is to make it as easy as possible. And when we are using the tools that already parents and the general users are already using, that always make things easier to adopt.
Definitely. So I've got here, tell us a bit more about the membership model and your view on network effects. So I could see like some of the playbook and spreading across multiple markets in 1 year is really incredible. So, you know, what does that look like when you break it down?
Yeah. So when we look at the membership, so for us at GoStudent, we always, believe that tutoring is a long-term game. So, in certain markets in Europe, like Germany, France, Austria, it's still very linked to a problem. So you have actually a kid who comes back from school with a bad grade in mathematics, and then you have a bit this alert at home, and the parent is looking for a tutor to actually help the kid for the next test, and then hoping that everything will go okay for the future. And for us, we've always said that for us, tutoring is a bit like sport. So you don't run a marathon from one day to another. It's a long-term gain. It's also something that you create a habit, and that's why you start liking it. And it's not only for people who have difficulties. Sport is not only for people who want to lose weight. Sport is actually something that enables you to create confidence because you feel better in your skin, because you also, like, from a mindset perspective, the sport has always been something that is good. And that's where we always wanted to do with tutoring, is to show to parents, to kids, that you should not be ashamed, first of all, of tutoring, and that tutoring is for every kid, that they have or not problem at school. And tutoring is there to develop their full potential. And that's why we started more with this membership mindset. Like when you go, for example, to a gym and you get a sport membership, you never go just for 4 sessions. You ask for half a year, 1 year, because you also know that at some time it would be hard, you would not be motivated and so on. But if you are like committed to it, it will be better. So that was for us the main reason of this membership. Then when we look at network, so of course it's a bit like with Airbnb. The more houses, the more option you have as a traveler, the more willing you will be to go to that platform, because you know that there will be a house that fits perfectly your need for your holiday. And that's a bit the same concept at GoStudent. So the more tutors we have, the different personalities, different interests, the different strength, locations where they are based, and so on, the more we can actually offer a wider choice to our users. And one actually strong belief that we have at GoStudent is that every student is unique and should need a teacher. And of course, in the current system, the public system, it's impossible to have one teacher for every kid. That's why we often have one teacher for 25 kids also. But that also means that the teacher needs to adapt his learning style to the average classroom, and often also not really adapting to the kid, but more to his own way of teaching. And with this one-on-one online tutoring, what you enable is that to really understand the need of the kid, the personality of the kid, his learning style, and to match it with the right tutor. And the more tutor we have, the higher likelihood to find the right match.
And how does that match happen? Is that intelligently matched through the platform, or because that, like you say, that's quite a human? I'm just thinking with my own, with coaches and facilitators as well. That's like, again, a very human connection. So how do you do that matching process?
So at GoStudent, we are what we call a managed marketplace. So we never wanted to just be like a self-service tool where you have a list of 30 filters, and then based on that, you can actually find the right fit. So for us, we always have a call with every prospect who wants to have a trial session to understand the need of the kid, the interest of the kid. So think sometimes about, what are his hobbies? Is he like playing football or like playing tennis? Is he more like a personality that is more shy? Or is he someone more extrovert? Does he need more someone who is kind of going to motivate him to study and to kind of show him how fun it can be to study? Or more someone who is going to build a structure around his work? So that really depending actually a bit on the problem of the kid and what the parent wanted. And then we knew the tutor. So our team of consultants of sales are actually very close to all our tutors. So they know them based on, I would say, like criteria. So they have also a list of filters and so on, but they're also often on the phone with our tutors. Mm-hmm. Because when they organize a trial session, they're going to call the tutor saying, hey, I have this kid, amazing. This is the story about that kid. That's what I suggest that you do with him during the call. So they also get to know the tutors a bit better for having this match. So today it's not fully automized. There is a big human component for also us to better learn what is actually this match about. But we are already experimenting more and more also a bit with AI. So we actually use a tool to assess also like, it's like 30 points actually on the face of the student and the tutor. And we were comparing how emotions are actually impacting each other. So a bit this empathy topic. So when the teacher is smiling, is the kid smiling, for example? Or how could we feel the stress or like if the kid was bored and so on. And this, we believe that in the future could also help us better to identify the perfect match between also the student and the tutor.
Yeah, I remember seeing a presentation on that kind of technology in Beijing. And, I guess it's like, yeah, you want to find that match rather than like, necessarily punish the student or the tutor for, because we all have these sort of, well, in the UK, you might call it like resting bitch face, but, like you just have these moments when you're sort of thinking and your emotions aren't necessarily on the surface. But yeah, I love the idea of like this symbiosis between the two people that are involved is a nice idea. And I mean, just with the market effects thing and thinking about the WhatsApp, how do you manage any potential disintermediation? Does that just come down to the SLA you have with tutors? So for example, if they're communicating, what stops them from going off? And like we saw in the fallout of the Chinese policy change, people started going, right, let's just go off and do this together anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we try also for the protection also of the kid to be as involved as possible in the entire actually relationship of the kid and the tutor. So in some WhatsApp group, for example, we have our advisors who are also part of it to see a bit what is happening, also to advise, also when the parent needs to have a different tutor or whatever. So we are never having it's not that our role is to do the matching and then we leave. It's really we have consultant, we are advisor of the parent and the kid, and we are trying to figure out, okay, what's the best support for the kid? And sometimes it can be changing the tutor or getting a tutor, an additional tutor for an additional subject and so on.
Oh, brilliant. That's great. I love that. I've got here, in 2020, the GoStudent team quadrupled from working out of the basement of a sailing school previously to a modern office to quadrupling to more than 160 employees. So how did the team, and you're being one of those original members, manage to stick to the original vision and culture during this rapid expansion? So something that probably a lot of people listening are grappling with as we speak.
So actually one big topic that we had. So when we actually moved to the new office, at that time, I think we were about like 50 employees or so. I gave the task to our new PR manager at that time to interview Felix Gregor, our head of HR, and myself to understand what are GoStudent values. So it was not about sitting in a room and actually like, defining, okay, what do we care about and so on. I told her, just interview us and figure out what we are saying. Why are we at GoStudent? What do we care about? What is our vision? What is also our personality, and how we actually impacting the company? And based on that, she actually highlighted 5 values. One of them being work hard, play hard, for example, be bold. In GoStudent, we trust. So these were actually some of the values that we always kind of communicating within the company. So in every office where you go, you can see posters, for example, on the walls with those values. We also reuse them, for example, in Slack messages. Like a funny example, for example, if there is a pizza Friday and then there is a few leftovers, you will have someone who will write pizza left, be fast or be last. That's one of our value. Or if we have to communicate something around like that is of importance for the company, if we had to maybe let go a very important employee or whatever, and we explain the reason why we actually had to let go, for example, this employee in GoStudent We Trust. We finish the message with in GoStudent We Trust, which actually bring this kind of community feeling that we are all in there together, and there is a reason why a decision that is maybe a bit unpopular or whatever or difficult to take has been taken. So that was the first phase. The second phase was a lot around onboarding. So every people who start at GoStudent go through an onboarding journey. So it's a 1 day of global immersion. So in whatever the department you join, you get the same onboarding than anyone else to learn about the history of GoStudent, what happened in the past, what is our vision, what are our values, what are the departments doing, how do they work with each other, and so on. And then they go into the onboarding for the specific department. But that really enables also the company to understand what is our mission and to be stick into one same mission, building the #1 global school.
Yeah, I really like that as well, because, everyone knows that you have to go through the task in the beginning of a company and you write down your values. But actually, I love the idea of like just having a dialogue with someone and they can like synthesize what you're actually saying. It's a really nice idea. Really good.
And it's also a bit linked to the brand strategy. So it's only now, for example, in 2022 that we're actually writing down our brand strategy, because at the end of the day, the brand is something that you don't build based on the white sheet, right? It's things that evolved over time, decisions that were made, direction that were taken. And then now we start actually writing it black on white, because we need it in order to ensure that everyone is aligned with our brand strategy, with our DNA. Also, when we start working with agencies or so on, then we can kind of hand over this playbook of this is GoStudent, this is what we value, this is our mission, this is our story. So this is not something that you do at the early days of a startup. It's something you do much later on.
So brilliant. So got here your admissions process. What percentage of applicants to be a GoTutor make it to become one of your tutors?
Yeah, so it's actually quite a strict process. So we accept like around 5%, if I remember well, actually,
of really? Wow.
who apply to be a tutor. So the first step is that they have to fill in actually like a recruitment form with the CV and information about them. But also the most important is that they need to pass a test for the subject that they want to teach, and they need to have an accept rate of 80%. Based on that, we actually look at the test plus the CV, and then we invite them to a group interview. During the group interview, we're going to assess more the pedagogical skills, so the empathy, how they will actually behave in front of the students, the level of maturity, and so on. And if they pass this group interview, then we have an onboarding process. We are going to explain them all the tools that we have, how it is to actually teach the GoStudent way, what we care about, what are our values, our mission, and so on. And then because we're also very close to our students and parents, we receive feedback on a regular basis. And if we receive negative feedback from a tutor, either from a more like a behavior perspective or from a subject, a very like hard skill perspective, we can contact the tutors, understand the problem, see if he needs training or not, or in some cases, also let him go if we don't believe that it is good for the company and for our students.
And in terms of online tutoring out there, is there a sort of set rate in terms of pay for tutors, or how do you rate it in terms of that market as well?
Yeah. So we try to really have like a fair pay. So every market, of course, have a different pay per hour. We also try to really incentivize our long-term tutors. So the more hours you have done with us, also the higher pay you get. There is also a bit of a kind of a bonus, more like how happy the customer is also. It's a really a fair pay. We work mainly with university students in certain markets, in other also with certified teachers. But I would say that, this is always things that we are questioning. But of course, what we do believe is that to attract the best teachers, we also need to have a pay that is attractive and fair for them.
And then I was looking at your website earlier, and I was interested to know, after such significant investment, what's next for GoStudent? So love to hear, when you think about that question, what's your focus in the next 12 months?
Yeah. So last year was all about, showing also to us, to our investors, to the world right there, that what we had built in the DACH region was actually a business model that could be easily duplicated across the world. So across Europe, North America, and Latin America, and that the need for tutoring was actually very similar across market. And that's why we've entered like more than 15 markets within a year and that was quite easy to duplicate. The processes were very simple. The need for tutoring was there and so on. But now what we see, of course, is that we start looking at the differences between all of those markets from a marketing perspective. For example, as I was saying earlier, the typical parent who is looking for tutoring in Germany might be more because, the kid has difficulties in mathematics and they're a bit more ashamed of it. They don't want to ask their friends around if they know a tutor or whatever. They will go online, more on the shadow market, looking for a tutor who can come to their kid's place. Or then we have other markets, more like in Greece, for example, or in Poland, where the need for tutoring happens a lot at the beginning of the year. So it doesn't depend on the test result. It's more back to school. I need to look for a tutor to accompany my kid across the entire school year. Or we also have markets like in Turkey, where it's much more about what we call the high flyers parents, the ambitious parents who wants to ensure that their kids actually are competitive enough to enter university, because in Turkey there is not a seat for every student who wants to go to university, and therefore is not so much linked to solving a problem, but more to maximizing the chance of the student to get actually a higher education. So from a marketing perspective, that also means that we need to adapt actually our messaging and a bit also our product, our offering, to attract the right segment of the market. And then it's also, of course, in terms of all operational costs, so trying to understand how can we actually be a sustainable business in every market, understanding the differences of each to make it actually work in the long run.
Really, really interesting. And I was just, when you were speaking there, I was thinking, I guess you've got the subject matter stuff, and then you've got the cross-cutting sort of soft skills side of things. And then I was also interested to know if you would do more kind of workplace once you've conquered the whole K-12 and then higher education space. Is that like a natural trajectory in terms of being able to scale what you're doing into different segments?
Definitely. So that's something for us. We want to also stay very open. So that's why we are building a global school, but we don't want to focus only on the kids. So right now, that's where we saw the main gap in the market. That was the tutoring for kids. There are some markets more like in Latin America, for example, where the main challenge is more on the language side, learning English, and that's also for adults actually. So adults can definitely be something that we want to go to. University students is a bit more challenging because teaching, for example, mathematics to someone who study economics is much harder to actually find a tutor. So that's why right now, in terms of scalability, focusing on elementary and secondary school was actually much easier to start the business. But definitely, we do believe that learning is lifelong, and why not stopping? There is no reason to just stop at the student side, but focus is first. We need to crack our business, make it sustainable, and then we can actually expand.
Right. This one will be of interest to people listening. So GoStudent's 3 strategic pillars: international expansion, product expansion through mergers and acquisitions, as well as market share growth in existing regions. So obvious question, which type of companies are appealing to GoStudent in terms of mergers and acquisitions?
Yeah. So one acquisition that we have made is TUS Media. It's a company actually in Spain who have built marketplaces across Spain, Italy, France, and also Latin America. They actually stop so they are not a managed marketplace as we are. So everyone can actually post an advertisement on their platform, and the contact is directly between the student and the tutor. And for us, it's actually a good way to actually also like reach a bigger part of the market, to kind of collaborate with those kind of companies and offering maybe also two different solutions. So on the one hand, the solution from the marketplace where there is no filter. So there they don't actually, do exams for the tutor. So everyone can actually post a job advertisement there. So there is no certification of quality of the tutoring. Or then you go with GoStudent, where it's actually more of a long-term approach, where you actually commit to a membership. But at the same time, you are ensured that the quality of the tutor is there, that you have someone who is supporting you across the journey if you need an additional subject or if you're unhappy with the tutor and so on. So that's actually one way. The second way is around the product. So we have also acquired Seneca Learning, a company in the UK, who actually built an algorithm and content for students and teachers. So on the one hand, enabling the teacher to give additional homework after school. This is actually a web application that is very entertaining, where the kid can actually play around and get questions to be answered. That can be geography, French, mathematics, and so on. So on the one hand, the teacher can give that to his students, and the majority, almost all the schools actually in the UK are working with Seneca. And then we also have, on the other hand, the parent or the student who can subscribe to a premium solution to also have access to additional content. But this is also a tool that is free. So that's what we call a freemium. And also that enables us to go with that tool to countries where the purchasing power is a bit more limited. So for example, in Latin America, and enabling and offering different solutions, more the premium side of GoStudent with one-on-one online tutoring, or the self-learning application with Seneca.
Really interesting. Okay, and so it feels like, so that's sort of helping bring people into the GoStudent sort of ecosystem as well, and yeah, okay. So with the investment rounds, did you get involved in that process?
Yes. Yeah. So since I would say since I joined, I was part of the rounds, because investors also at the beginning, they care a lot about the team. So the product and of course the business model makes sense, but what they want to know is who are actually the key leaders in the company, and are they also the right people to move the company to the next level?
And do you have any tips to convey to people from, probably like the best pitch you ever did, and the one that you were like, oh, that, I wish I could go back and do that again?
So I think for us, we've been always very transparent with our investors, the new one and the existing one, the potential one and the existing one, let's say. So in order to build trust, you need to show them what you have, right? And showing them the data and so on. And you need to feel comfortable that, yes, not everything is perfect. Yes, you don't have the best profitability yet. Yes, you don't have everything, but here are what we have. And this is what you can make, the learnings you can make from it. And actually, our first investors that were Left Lane Capital actually really helped us a lot also to move from Series A to Series C, Series B, because they really helped us to move the next level in terms of finance, the way we were reporting our data and so on. And you can only get that if you give them access to everything, so they can really deep dive and understand what you are showing them, question things. It's often uncomfortable discussions, right? What do you put in your CAC? How do you calculate your LTV and so on? But at the same time, it's the good for the business. So for me, I would really say, try to see your investors as partners, that they can challenge you. They've seen a lot of things from other companies and they can help you. The second thing was also how you build also a relationship with those investors. So sometimes investors were telling us that it was too early, for example, or they needed to see, better numbers or better growth and so on. And Felix, so is one of the founders and was also mainly actually managing the relationship with those investors, was also always making sure that he was keeping them up to date, showing them on a regular basis the progress of the company, sometimes, going for a drink with them and so on, to really keep this relationship. So I think investment actually is a very relationship driven, industry. And this is important to maintain that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Um, if anyone is recruiting for a head of growth or chief growth officer, what should they be looking for?
It's a very, very good question, because also a question that I always receive is, what is a chief of growth? Because depending on the companies, this is actually a different title. For me, I got hired as a head of sales and marketing back in the days, because the main piece of growth at that time was to build what we call the customer acquisition machine. Then the next phase of growth was actually expansion. Now our next phase of growth is ensuring the localization in terms of marketing, also in every market. So I think I would say, like, for me, I think also the reason I was hired at the time was my skills for sales and marketing, because growth at the end of the day, that's coming also mainly from that, but also because I was very hands-on. And growth, I mean, I would say my job changed so often that you need to have a profile of a person who is very open-minded, open to change, always looking for what's next, and someone who is at the end of the day very complementary to the founders. And I do not believe that actually you should have a head of growth. If you have a head of growth, then it's someone maybe on the marketing side who report to the CMO, who is looking at small initiatives, what's next, what are the new channels that we could test, and so on. But if you want to be really serious and really think always the step ahead in your company, and push kind of very big projects, being in the C-level enables that you are on the one hand very close to the founders, very close to the entire company strategy, and so on. And on the other hand, that you can actually work with the entire company. So if you are head of growth, it's actually more complex to get your VP sales or your VP customer success on board. That, of course, if you are part of the more executive team, you can really gather all those resources together, because one of the success actually of our international expansion, we didn't build a team. We actually took resources from all the existing team that were dedicated to expansion. So they would still report to the sales department, the customer success department, and so on, but they were dedicated to international expansion. And I was working with them on driving actually our entering new markets.
And your own sort of leadership, do you have like external coaches or mentors, or how is that just sort of grown by doing it, or yeah?
So I think it depends on the profile of everyone. I'm more someone who is like hands-on and, having a problem and trying your way around to solve it. But I've learned also a lot by, first of all, interviewing people. So, for example, when I was interviewing for the country managers or like the marketing team and so on, to try to understand how they do their job, how their team is structured, what are the challenges that they are facing with the current structure, and so on. So that was a very big source of learning for me. Then the second is hiring people who actually know more than you. So I've always hired people who are complementary to me from a skill perspective. I didn't know what was their job about, and I was telling them, I know there is this problem, we need to solve it. You've done it in the past. Please join GoStudent to do it. So that was a second learning. Third learning, it was also working with so we have an advisory board of people who've been working in startups, who are still working in startups. We could contact, and it's a lot of the main topics are often about organization. So how do you ensure the collaboration between two departments, or how do you structure the org, and so on? And sometimes ideas coming from, marketing and so on. But these are often very specific to your business. So everyone knows that you need to test referrals and, like performance marketing and TV and so on. Those channels, at the end of the day, they are limited, but it's how you're going to make it happen, and more on the execution side and really understanding your business that will make the difference.
Amazing. I'm sucking this all in. Well, this is quite interesting, because I ran a workshop recently about assessments and people wanting to move towards more perhaps authentic assessment techniques. So I've put, as part of your online experience, do you ever have any problems with either engagement or cheating? So those were two things that came out as sort of existential threats or worries that people in that world were concerned about. So I suppose that relates to, people being online. Are they engaged? What are the engagement metrics? And how can you, I don't know if you do any sort of prep tests, whether there's any, people try to shortcut that or not. It may be that because you're one step forward, the incentive is not great enough to do it, but
So on the engagement side, so yes, we definitely did test actually to also understand how engaged is the student, because that was actually one of the main concern of the parent. It's like, he was saying, no, the teacher needs to sit next to my kid. My kid is lacking kind of discipline and so on. But what we've proven is that when the kid is immersed in his computer with his headphone, there is no distraction at all. And the more the teacher lets the kids speak, of course, the more like engage and focus it will be. So that's why when we did actually this emotional intelligence test too, we realized that, for example, languages is one of the topic where the kid is the most engaged versus, for example, maybe mathematics, where it's a bit more complex because the tutor is maybe more explaining. But that's also what we are always teaching also our teachers, is that how the engagement, how it is important to ask question and make sure that the kid understood, repeats certain things and so on. And then on the cheating part, so of course we are not bulletproof. So like there are some tutors who might try to cheat the exam or so. But at the end of the day, it always go back to you, because we will always receive the feedback from the parent or we will see in the statistics that maybe the kid did not evolve fast enough and so on. So they can maybe cheat and we might not see it right away, but we'll also see it afterwards. So I would in any case not advise anyone to do it, because we want teachers who are passionate about what they are doing. And if they are cheating, that means that they actually not probably the right fit for us, and treat it directly.
Yes, in any system anyway, but that's a good point. So I've got two more questions, no, I've actually done that one. So, well, to wrap up then, so you're obviously full steam at the moment, fully immersed. So how do you kind of chill out outside of GoStudent? What does the rest of your world look like?
So one of the fantastic thing about Vienna and Austria in general is the nature. So from Vienna, you take 1 hour drive and you're in the mountain. You can go to 2000 altitude hike. So that's, for me, that's actually one way of relaxing, being with fresh air. We are the entire day, in front of our mobile or our laptop in Zoom calls, because we are such an international company that actually little happens in the office, but much more over the computer. So going hiking, walking around is something for me very important. Dancing too. So I used to be actually quite an intense dancer back in the days. Now it goes more for clubbing rather than the actual sport, but it's still a good way to get the steam off.
What kind of dancing did you specialize in?
Did everything, a bit of classical, a bit of modern, a bit of hip hop, a bit of funky, a bit of modern jazz. So it was just for me a good way to express my emotion. I never liked too much when I had to remember by heart the choreography. It's more about hearing the music and moving around it.
Fantastic, amazing. And so one question we always ask everyone, all of our guests, is any books, projects, people, things that have really inspired you that you would love to share with our listeners that you perhaps go back to or think, that's a really, really excellent,
Maybe two books that I could share here. So I think there are many that are inspiring, but two that I would like to share. On the one hand is the Strength Finder from Gallup. It's actually more an assessment book. So it's based on a kind of a test that you can make to understand what are your strengths or the strength of your team. And for me, it has been very helpful at the beginning to also help me to understand what are my strengths, because you read a lot. When you look at a job description, they all tell you that you need to be strategic or hands-on or whatever. And then the question is, what are you really? And I think that's actually very useful. And then to understand also in your team, if you have actually a complementarity of skill and who in your team is actually the right person for a certain task. And sometimes, when we're in a company like ours growing so fast, we don't spend enough time with our team. So we don't have enough time sometimes to really understand the strength of each other, and having that tool enabled to map a bit more people and see what we are missing. And also sometimes for ourselves, we are sometimes so busy with the daily task, we kind of lose focus, and we always sometimes need to kind of look inside again and understand, okay, what are my strengths and what can I capitalize on? And also, which is very great in that book, is I do believe that every strength is actually linked to a weakness. And when you are a very passionate person and very strong with certain aspects of your personality, you're also very strong on other aspects when you are stressed. And that's always kind of the opposite of your strength. And I think it's also very important to understand those. So to be aware of it. So when you are a bit overstressed and so on, to be careful with those. That's the first book. And the second book that I also read a few years ago was You Are a Brand, which I think is also a very interesting way of positioning oneself for your career and in the company and so on, to define if yourself were a brand, how would you actually market it? What are your values? What is your mission? How do you look? How do you talk? What is the perception of the others about you? And is this perception like aligned with actually what you want to do and what you want to show? And it's actually a very interesting book to read that I really advise.
Fantastic. Well, so thank you so much, because there's two great recommendations there, and you've given us like nearly an hour of your time. So super appreciate that. And can't wait to get this out for our listeners, Laura. So thank you again.
Thank you a lot, Sophie. I wish you a good day.
That's all for this week's episode. Thank you so much again to Laura for being such a great guest, and to Learnosity for sponsoring this week's episode. Whatever you're up to, enjoying the last bits of your summer holidays, preparing to go back to school, or finessing the last bits on your latest sprint of work, enjoy and goodbye.